Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. And also, welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. My name is Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest Thinking Out Loud, where I explore topics in the board gaming universe that are of interest to everybody. What is more interesting than price? How we price games, how expensive are games, how expensive have games been, how expensive are they going to be, why are they going to be so expensive? Following up on my video that I did, if you saw just the Shelf Stories feed on prices and the psychological effects. But I'm a psychologist. I am not an economist, and I'm not a business person. I've never made a game, never published a game. So I put out the call on Twitter, and my friend has responded. This is the first time I'm meeting him, and it's been a pleasure speaking with him so far. I'm looking forward to this conversation. He is the founder and CEO of Fort Circle Games, bringing to you such games as Shores of Tripoli and Women Votes. I forget exactly what's that called.
Votes for Women.
Votes for Women. I had the words correct. And a lot of different historical games that are coming down the pipe. He is Kevin Bertram. Welcome to the show.
How's it going? Good to meet everybody.
Oh man, it's great. No, thank you so much for helping us out. So the reason that someone, I think it was one of my fans. Sorry, I didn't note that. But was a backer of Shores of Tripoli, and remember that you gave an update that really laid out, the printing and the cost, like just in granular detail. If you ever want to know like what the pricing is of a game, not a card game that's tiny, not a minis game that's giant, but like a center of the hobby game, really laid it out for us. So we're going to go through that, and we're going to have a little bit of an education, and the episode will be in two parts, but I'll get into that in a little bit. First, let's introduce you and Fort Circle. You do have some games, and both your games so far that are about to hit have solo modes. So the One Stop Co-op Shop is very excited about that. So tell us a little bit about Fort Circle Games and what you have to offer.
Sure. So we are a historical publisher. I would say that we are looking, we're looking for games that are a little bit outside the ordinary or historical topics that aren't covered. So we're never going to make a game about the East Front in World War II, because there's like 500 of those. So we're always looking for kind of unique historical topics that are important, but a little underrepresented, at least in the gaming industry, probably not in history overall. And so I was really happy. So I thought it would be really kind of demystifying for folks. And so the Shores of Tripoli was published. We had a 5,000 print run. We're selling through that, pretty excited. And so I thought, people want to probably know. I mean, I want to know what the costs are and how it works for other companies. And so as an update, I posted that, and we'll go into that in detail in a little bit when you're ready. Sure. But I've also been a pretty avid Kickstarter user. I joined in May in 2010. I've backed over 500 projects, so I back about 50 a year. My very first one was the Alien Frontiers, which, it raised, I got it here. It raised $14,885 from 228 backers.
And that was a record great at the time, my friend, a record.
And now that's a bad day's work for some companies. So,
that's a card game.
Yeah. So, I'm happy to talk about the Kickstarter process, or not really. I mean, I'll talk about that, but I'm sure lots of other people can talk about that more authoritatively than I can. But I will give you the exact costs that occurred for us. And then I'll also talk about how these price increases are affecting us as a publisher, even though we haven't increased the price for Votes for Women, nor will we increasing prices next year. But it's definitely going to put us under some cost pressure, profit pressure. So I'm happy to go into that as you would like me to.
So we're going to structure the episode. We're going to break things up into sections. So the first thing is just the education, right? I think, you have Shores of Tripoli is like right in the middle. So that's not a small card game. It's not a huge minis game. It's right in the middle of what we're used to paying ish, right? So I want to get a sense for how that breaks down and give people education, what the costs are, and ask some specific questions there. And then number two, I want to talk about the thing that I talked about in the video, which was kind of deluxification, and just the pricing and how that all plays in, because that's separate from the manufacturing. So then at that last piece, we're going to depress the people.
Awesome.
We'll leave the people with the best news possible, which is the crud that's happening in China, or like with manufacturing in general. But we'll save that toward the end. So we'll do 1, 2, 3.
Sounds good.
So then, okay. So let's talk about so Shores of Tripoli, 5,000 copies, right?
Yep.
I think that the game was MSRP $69.95.
Well, the MSRP is 70, and I'll talk about that in a second.
70,
MSRP is so messy because what you're really thinking about is the 3-tier distribution system that still somewhat exists in the hobby, where a retailer will pay 50% of MSRP and a wholesaler or a distributor will pay 40% of MSRP. So a game that costs $70, which very few people charge that. They charge usually like 65 or something. If we sell it to a wholesaler, it's $28 to us. And if we sell it to a retailer directly, it's $35. So that's kind of where that MSRP comes in. And you're like, oh, well, of course the middlemen deserve their cuts. But as we talk about it, we'll kind of see where that's going to probably cause some price increases.
Sure.
So
we're going to get into the price, but we should probably give context about what Shores of Tripoli is. I say it's in the middle. It's not a card game, not a biz game. It is a war game, I guess. Dudes in a map. It's
a history game that looks at both military and diplomatic and economic aspects of a war. So yes, some would call it a war game. Some
Waro.
Yes, sure, sounds perfect.
Waro, perfect.
So I would say that it's a lighter game. So it's meant to be where people who are maybe history buffs but not big gamers can pick it up pretty easily. But yet it's still competitive enough that an old grognard who's played Avalon Hills games for 40 years still feels pretty comfortable playing it and like it's fine as a teaching game. There's a heavy push on quality components. So the box is 2.5 millimeters thick, which some people have said it's like armor compared to a normal box. And there's a lot of wood pieces instead of cardboard counters. So like there's ship meeples and then the cards are all linen finished. And so it's a I wouldn't say it's like a super deluxe kind of edition, but we tried to make as quality. We didn't, cheat the corners on either the card quality or the map quality. So we tried to really put a lot of effort into that.
It's looking at the pictures, and I'm showing pictures as we converse. It sounds like it's the kind of quality upgrades that are for like longevity. You can throw these wooden meeples against the floor and it wouldn't be too much damage.
I've only had to replace a handful, so they take a beating. So, so that's what the Shores of Tripoli is.
Okay. All right. Very simple concept. I'm hopefully going to try to get something going. A war game is a little bit tough for me, but I might try to get some coverage in the One Stop Co-op Shop and see if I can make that happen. But let's talk about the price and how we get to pricing. So,
for the Kickstarter, if you purchased one game, it was $50 plus $10 shipping in the United States. And so that's $60. And then here's the costs that I, as a publisher, have from that. And I'm going to list them all out. It's going to be a little boring, but roll with it. So it's $8.
You wanted to know, people. That was you. You wanted to know. You're like, you don't know nothing about prices, Jason. Get somebody on there. And I'm like, here you go.
And this is all on an update page for the Kickstarter for the Shores of Tripoli. So you can see the numbers if these goes by too fast. Sure. So we paid $8.93 per unit produced because we had a 5,000 print run. We spent $20,000 in artwork and prototyping, which we had about 300 playtesters. So it was a pretty wide effort. And so $20,000 divided by 5,000 is $4 a game. And then we give $1 to Toys for Tots for every game sold. So that's another $5,000 or $1 a game. So those kind of core costs that would never change depending on where we're selling it is $13.93. $14. So then there's a bunch of other costs that vary. Depends on where it's going to and how we're shipping it. So the freight and customs to come to the United States was $1.80. And that's a price that has increased significantly, as we'll talk about later. The Kickstarter and Stripe fees was $4.50. The CrowdOx and Stripe fees were $1.09 because that's how people would pay for their shipping. Fulfillment was a total of $15.51. And that included $1 COVID fee. Now that's gone up a little bit too, but that's for shipping to someone here in the United States. And then the designer royalty is 6%. And that's a little weird because I'm the designer, but I want to be in practice for paying my other designers to pay myself on a quarterly basis. And now, our designer, Tori Brown, who designed Votes for Women, she gets paid quarterly as the Kickstarter money comes in and as people pre-order it. So, so that's a good practice. So that all adds up to be $39.73 or about $40. So it sounds like there's $20 profit, but that's gross profit. So then we take out the fact we're not going to sell 50,000 games or 5,000 games. We're going to sell 4,700 because we send out review copies and we donate copies to conventions and whatever. And then there's lots of other expenses that eat into that. But if we had just sold the game through Kickstarter, we sold 5,000 copies, we made $20, that'd be $100,000 for 2 years' work. But then we have, $40,000 a year in overhead fees. So that's where you see that money going down. But of course, we don't sell them all on Kickstarter. So that's where this 3-tiered situation comes in. So if we sell to a retailer, we're getting $35. Now, some of our costs go down too. We still have to pay freight, but the shipping per game is a lot less. It's not $15.41, it's about $4. The designer royalty is a percentage. So instead of being $3, it's $2.10. So so the costs is down a little bit. And so that profit is more like $12 or $13 a game. If we sell it to a wholesaler, where we get $28, most of the costs are still the same. The designer royalty is a little less. The shipping is slightly less. And there we make about $6.50 a game. So
way down.
It depends on where you're spending.
What exactly do you mean by wholesaler? Are you talking like
a distributor, I guess, is just Alliance would be an example of a distributor. So, and there's always little deals going on here and there. Maybe it's 38%, maybe it's 42%, but that's a ballpark. So then the question is how are you selling your games? Are you selling them all direct to consumer? Well, then you're going to actually make some money. If you're selling most of them to retailers, you're going to make a little bit of money, but not a lot of money. And if you're selling wholesalers, then you're, $6 a game. That's $30,000 for 2 years work, which, you need to start. Yeah. Now, of course, as you get we get more comfortable making games and learning, advertising smarter, then, maybe we publish 2 and 3 games a year. And then that becomes almost a, middle-class salary for the owner. So that's sort of the ballpark for Shores of Tripoli. Do you want me to talk about votes for women? Because that's seeing price increases, or do you want me to put that off till later?
We'll go off until later. I think that gives us enough to work with for now. So I'm looking at, first of all, the Kickstarter, Kickstarter is just, and direct to consumer is way more profitable for you.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know if people appreciate that. But talk a little bit more about how Kickstarter has really changed the game for small publishers and really help make it affordable for folks like you to do your thing.
Sure, because the $70 MSRP I feel is too high. I don't feel comfortable charging that. I would like it to be $60, but if it's $60, that means retailers aren't paying $35, they're paying $30. That means wholesalers aren't paying $28, they're paying $24, right? And that squeezes where we're not making enough profit at all to cover our other costs that we have, the website and warehousing and all of those other overhead expenses. So that's why, technically the MSRP is 70, but you never feel good about charging that. But the problem with going direct to consumer then is our local store in Washington, D.C. is called Labyrinth Games, and it is a fantastic store. And people go in there and they do a wonderful job with the local schools, and they educate people, and they also pay their workers a fair wage. It's exactly the kind of thing that we want to support. So you're stuck. You're I need to sell some direct to consumer so I don't, go broke, but I also don't want to not support local retailers. And so as a publisher trying to do the ethical thing, you're kind of stuck. And so you're doing a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. So now if we were only direct to consumer, we could charge less. We could just say, it's a $50 game plus shipping. But then we would, we would benefit in the short run, but we would not benefit in the long run, because then, if everybody did that, local game stores would cease to exist. And I think we would all realize that would be disastrous for the industry.
So then talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about, because at the end of the day, my context is kind of pricing for the common good. It's if you just look at the bottom line, there's certain things that make sense, certain things that don't, right? If you're just looking at the numbers and making them work. So if I'm looking at the way you've priced out Shores of Tripoli, you're making $30 some odd for a direct to consumer game, you're making way less. Well, you're also making way less if you're going to Europe. I can notice that too.
Right. Yes.
Like the shipping to Spain was like $5 a game, net gross profit, which is not great. So then, like, but you want to spread the word. So like that is an extra cost. Like if you really wanted to make money, you would sell in America or wherever you can sell the cheapest. So you're already making a decision to go there for like the good, the good of gaming or whatever. But then the game stores, right? And so talk about a little bit the quote unquote, like elaborate on the quote unquote collapse of, like it would be disastrous for us, so to speak.
Sure. So obviously COVID has scrambled the whole discussion about in-store shopping. And, I don't own a store. I owned a store in the late 90s. So I have an appreciation for what they're going through, but I can't speak authoritatively like what their numbers are like. But I think that, the game store is a point of contact for customers who want to explore new games. And like, I only think we're in like maybe 20 stores because we're not with wholesalers or distributors. And so, we want people to find our games, and you can do that some on the internet. There's certainly marketing that occurs there, but you also, you want someone to be able to come into a store and they're saying, my 14-year-old daughter is really interested in women's suffrage. Do you have a game on that? And they're like, yes, we do. It's right here. Right here's Votes for Women. Whereas that's just a little harder to do on the internet, right? Search Votes for Women, you're going to get a million hits about all kinds of stuff. So,
right, Shores of Tripoli, vacation spot.
Exactly. So, Marine Corps hymns and stuff. Right. So, it's all over the place. And I just, I love my local game store. Like the owner, Kathleen, is just fantastic. And so, I want her to succeed. And really everywhere I've lived, there's always been a good game store where I don't really, I'm at an age where I don't really meet people, but like when I was younger, you would meet people and you would, learn new games. And if you're not in the industry, I'm in the industry now, so I'm watching every game that comes out. But, if you're not in the industry, but you enjoy the hobby, it's a crucial place. And so then I, as a publisher, have a fine line to walk in that I need to make sure that I can still eat. And I need to make sure that I can still buy shoes for my daughter. And, I'm lucky that my wife works in educational technology. So between her income and then what I'm doing here, we can squeak out a living. But, like at the same time, so like, I need to make sure that I'm not only concerned with my own profit line. I need to also make sure I'm concerned with the other parts of the ecosystem, or else if all those stores went away, then you'd see a huge consolidation in the gaming industry because only the big boys would be able to fight it out. And, maybe I could make, 500 games selling them, but then I'd have to raise the price and make them $100 because it's a small print run. And that's not the path I want to go down. I don't think most publishers do. Maybe a few, but most of us are concerned about the ecosystem.
And so like local game stores reach niche markets, they create new, markets. They do all these things that are not going to appear in a balance sheet.
Yes. And also, well, my local store is fantastic. It's in a fairly diverse neighborhood. They work with all the local schools. They're really broadening the interest in games in general. I'm obviously most interested in historical games, but games in general. And so that's really, really a net good for our industry that, we have to be mindful to. And if that means I make $5,000 less a year or $10,000 less a year, but I know that some stores are going to make, spread out, maybe they only make $1,000 more off because of I've done this, but there's, multiply that over, many publishers. And I think that we all kind of have a collective obligation to price fairly, but in such a way that we can work with retailers.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, okay, thank you so much for the education. I think that gives a good context to this second part of the conversation, which is where I come in. And I think that, so I did the video on prices. Please, if you listen to the podcast, stop it right now. Go listen to Shelf Stories. Check out what I think about prices. And
it's definitely worth watching, by the way.
And I thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm not talking, I guess my point is psychological. I stay in my lane. I'm a psychologist, and just, thinking about how prices play out in psychology and among, as social beings, thinking about the common good. It's exactly what my friend Kevin was talking about. He walked right into it. I had no idea, but I had a feeling because of the pricing, right? I mean, it's a $70 game. So what I'm talking about in the video is the Deluxlification, and that's a Kickstarter thing for the most. That's not just a Kickstarter thing, but like the way it plays out in the modern hobby, like Kickstarter, I feel incentivizes a measure of Deluxlification, and I'm talking about like minis instead of of meatballs. I'm talking about game trays with a Z. Like not just like
or even just special cards or any kind of fear of missing out to drive that imperative to buy.
Right.
Yeah.
So then what I want to really understand is I think there's a wave of conversation that I've had that says that companies have to do this. Like this is a thing that companies, like companies going to company and that, they have to make margin. So, and again, we're not talking about COVID or manufacturing. We're going to leave that for the third part of the discussion. We're just talking about, let's say it's 2019 and, Marvel United has come out, CMON has come out with like, their stuff with 17 expansions. That's another version of it. Release the entire product line at once, get that all in. And, you don't want to miss out on that exclusives, the whole thing. Right.
Yep.
So I think there's this line of, a couple of things. First, that if the market can take it, then it's fine. It's inbounds. And second, companies kind of have to do this in order to, exist. So then tell me about, educate me a little bit about Deluxlification and some of the looks that you're making on your face.
Sure. So I want to be clear that I would never criticize another publisher because I don't know their business model. I don't know their practice. So that being up front, I'll tell you what we do, and then I'll mildly criticize some things I've seen. Sure. So, our philosophy is that we are going to make the very best game we can. We're not going to keep out secret parts of it or the best parts that you have to pay more for. Like, that's just not, that doesn't philosophically seem right to me. So here's our best game. We put all the cards in it. Here's our best pieces, like that we feel that we can afford at this price that we're offering it. And here's the offering. Now, we lose out. We might not get as much fear of missing out from people, but I don't really care. Like, I feel like we can still we can make enough money by putting together our best product and putting it forward.
You're now, still a businessman. This is not a charity.
Yeah.
Or exactly. Not a pure charity. Like you're still making margin and
Yeah. So before I started this, like in 2010, when I started backing Kickstarters, I worked in the tech industry and I made a fair bit of money, and certainly much more than I make now. And so I would see games that I really wanted to support, and they would like have an offer like, back it for $300 and we'll name one of the cities. And so I'd like, there's a city in, what's that game? Kings of Steam that's named for my daughter, nice. Pageopolis. No, Pompage, because my daughter's name is Paige, right? And so like I would do those, and I'm kind of a sucker and I'm okay with that because I wanted to see these games made. And that's back when Kickstarter was kind of, I don't want to say it was this pure expression of creativity, but it was a little less, it wasn't CMON and Queen coming on there.
Like it wasn't a marketing engine. Like
right. It wasn't a pre-order system.
It was Adam Poots who knows who he's doing, putting out a name for, and it doesn't even have a game yet. He just has art and sculpts. And it's like, I promise there's a game. And eventually it worked out. And it was the Wild West. So like there were a lot of projects that didn't work out. Look up Odin's Ravens
it was so few though, right? Like I said, I've backed 513 games and I think I haven't got 5. Like it's small. Like, and there's been some high profile, terrible crashes. I get that. But for the most part, like just, hardworking people trying to make a game. It's usually not their day job. It's their like something they're doing on the side, and they put together a nice product. And, some of the games have been a little subpar and some have been fantastic. And I think we need to kind of roll with that as consumers because, I'm also a consumer. And so, maybe because I'm a publisher, I give a little more leeway to the publishers. But sure. I don't. So let me segue into really what I think is upsetting you. And I will say that I'm not really pleased about it, is that I don't like a 2-tiered game, which is here's the base game, or here, if you spend a bunch more money, you can get like these extras. And while I understand that that's a business practice, it feels like it's classes, like we're saying here, the plebes can play the base game and then the rich people can play the more expensive game. And I don't think that builds a community. And I find that a little tiny bit problematic. And I don't want to say other companies should not do that, because I don't know, like I say, I don't know their books, and
Right.
they might have great healthcare system and pay their employees a lot, and so they need to make up that margin some more. So I'm not going to criticize
Absolutely.
explicitly any company, but that's not the philosophy that we feel comfortable with, and for the reasons just said. Like, I don't want this two-tiered gaming community where there's a lower tier and an upper tier. And I understand that exists, like Magic cards. You got to buy more cards. Like, I get it. It exists. And right, like, this is the world we live in, but we don't have to actively make it worse. Like, I think we can kind of, at least, within the confines of the capital system that we live in, we can at least be decent. And I think that one of those decencies is trying to make sure that people have a game that everyone can enjoy. And, couple extra add-on pieces. I'll be honest. So with Votes for Women, our backers have been very patient because of what's been going on in China. And so we didn't have it as a fear of missing out. Oh, you got to buy it. But we might do a nice little bonus for them just because they've been so patient. But that's, is that one step down this bad road? I'm hoping not, right? I still think that we're fundamentally saying, here's the game. This is the best game that we can put together. Here you go. It's one price. So that's, I guess, where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and if people haven't watched the video, or if they're still not tracking the argument is that when you do the two-tiered, right, for the plebes and for the upper class, I don't use this word in the first video I made, but I use it in the follow-up. Gentrifying. It's almost like you're gentrifying the hobby. And what gentrification is in other contexts, it's when a group of people who can afford it, they drive the market. Right. They have the purchasing power. They drive the market. So it's like, if they want it, then companies are like, okay, they want it, so they get it. And then there's this idea that, like, well, the market wants it. And it's like, well, that's not the market speaking. That's like a top level of the market saying that. And then you have that next step, the plebes. Of course, a history person is going to say that, the plebes. That you're going to have that second level that could afford it. I mean, we're not talking about huge money. And if we're talking about I won't say the name of the game, but like a $40 game and an $80 deluxe game, that somebody's going to sit there and say, just on an individual level, I want the $80 game. I can afford that. That's okay. And on one game. Okay. I don't know every company. That's it. It's just the ecosystem. I love that you use the word ecosystem. When you kind of spread that out, that's going to have a price raising effect overall. And so hitting pause in 2019, we definitely saw a arcing upward in price, in expectation. I even heard like publishers, like they would post on Twitter saying, "Oh, I can't believe that demand for game trays." Publishers feeling the pressure to be like, "Well, I got to do this or else," or whatever it is. And is that something that you were aware of, or are you just kind of in a different niche?
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of a niche in, like, some of these companies are printing 50,000 games and we're printing 5,000. And so we just don't do a game tray. Like, people can do whatever they want. Like, I've seen some people, take minis and make really nice ships and stuff. And if they want to do that, that's great. But I just don't want to be the one doing that. Let me just briefly, though, play devil's advocate.
Okay.
So if a company does this two-tiered system, and then they use that, basically they soak the rich to make the base game cheaper, or they are really good to their employees, or they sponsor lots of conventions, or
they pay the designers more. That's another one that people have said. Like, it's a side question, but it came up a bunch of times. Designers are underpaid. Do you agree with that?
So, yes, but there are people who are paid even worse. The developers are paid even worse. So, because designers, like, if you get a hit, right, you're golden. Like, Elizabeth Hargrave designed Wingspan, and it sold 1.2 million copies. Now, that's a once a year, once every couple of years kind of hit. So, you're incentivized as a designer to make a really good game. Hopefully, you don't let the profit motive crowd out your creative vision and historical accuracy, et cetera. But, I don't know. I think designers are paid almost fairly. And, I paid my artists, and then Shores of Tripoli did really well. So then I sent them all a bonus. And, Votes for Women, I think, is going to do exceptionally well next year when we do a second printing, and our flat rate is 6% to our designers of whatever the payment cost is. So like if it's on Kickstarter, it's $3. If they buy it, full price $70, that's $4.20. And so whatever that sliding scale is. But then, I paid Tori additional to do some marketing work because she knows so much about the subject matter. And I don't know. Considering no one else is getting rich, I think that designer fees are pretty fair. Now, there are companies that just don't pay their designers on time, and I got no time for that, right? Yeah. Like you have an agreement, whether or not it's a written contract, you have an agreement to pay someone, pay them, pay them on time, give them accounting that's appropriate. That there's no room for people who don't pay their bills to designers who are working for, frankly, no one's making any big bucks in this industry unless you happen to hit this massive hit. So
but I interrupted your thing. So let's say so they're doing 2-tier system, they're generating all this extra money, and it is extra money. It is not that expensive relative to what you can charge to throw in the minis and throw in the game trays. Like that's just like luxury stuff, and you will increase your margin doing that. So then you're giving examples. So as I was saying, like there are good things that a publisher can do with that money, right? Like maybe they give more, like we give, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but we give games to Toys for Tots. And then also our backers actually gave just as many. So we both gave about 150 games to Toys for Tots. Well, that's nice. Pretty great, right? And like I said, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. We do it because it also makes us look like a good corporate citizen because we want to be. But, so then they can do things like support the Zenobia Awards or any of the kind of game designer broadening programs that are out there. Like if they're using that margin to do good things, I guess I'm less upset about it. But if it's just a cash grab, then it's really hard to be thrilled about it. And I'm not really thrilled about it anyways, but I'm trying to play devil's advocate and say, well, here's some reasons why you might do that. Yeah, but so let's say you have a really popular game and you are using that money to seed the other games. Right. Yep. I know companies do that too, right? It's like you have your evergreen and then it's like, okay, let's make my deluxe version of the evergreen because I know that's going to sell. And the deluxe version is going to cause all sorts of agita. It's like, oh my God, $250 for what? And people complain, but the margin comes in and then you use it to subsidize, take a risk on people, take a risk on minority designers, POC, women, LGBTQ, and maybe those games don't make money, but you're using it to subsidize those groups. Or my friend Andrew Navarro over at Earthborn Games, you're looking at local sourcing, local manufacturing. There's so many reasons to pay the extra money that I'm not against at all. Right. It's just, is the money getting hoovered up into shareholder value?
Right. If it's a cash grab, I don't think any of us are really thrilled with it. So, but if it's, but if there's, some ethical considerations going on, yes, we're charging a premium for these products, but here's where that premium is going. And if a company's transparent about it, I'm probably less upset about it. But if it's just a cash grab, I think we're all on the same page about it.
Yeah. So. Well, the two of us.
Well, the three people matter in this conversation.
That's right. Well, okay. So my point being, I would like to encourage companies because some people watch my video and they're like, oh, well, Jason doesn't like deluxe. He wants to get rid of deluxe. No, it's not. That's it. I think there's ways to do it. And I think the 2-tier system and the all-in packages, and the different marketing things, I question that because I just think it's not good for us as a community. It's not good for our mental health, all that kind of thing. That's all. And I would like companies, if you could make margin kind of being a better citizen, please consider. So then, okay. So now we're talking about a $70 game that's, profitable, that you can kind of do as a business person, feel good about it, serve both hands, social responsibility and personal profit. That's going to get changed. Now we're going to fast forward 2020, 2021. Tell us a little bit.
Sure.
Of what we're looking at.
When I was talking earlier, we were talking about all the costs that went into Shores of Tripoli. Votes for Women, we charge the very same thing, $50 for a game. If you want to buy one, $10 shipping in the United States. And instead of $8.93 for production, it's now in 2020, when I got a pricing, it would have been $9.48. We're like, 50 cents. That's not a big deal. And now in 2021, that production is $11.86. Ooh. So you're talking about, almost $3 increase. And then
per
unit. And then there's also the cost of getting the game here. And what previously cost, $1.80 for the Shores of Tripoli will cost, if we ship it, will cost a minimum $5 and more like $7. And so you're talking about that per unit price, no matter where you're selling it, because these are hard costs, is $10 more. So now that Kickstarter game where you're making maybe $20 gross profit, now it's $10. When you're selling to a retailer, you're not making $12, $13, you're making $2 or $3. And with a wholesaler, you're actually losing money. Like you're negative on that. You're losing money for every game, and you can't make that up on volume. So that was a joke.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're going the wrong way with that. If you're doing volume and you're on a negative thing, that you can't wrap it to the positive. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And so to make it worse so shipping is a real problem. So the Shores of Tripoli got a lot of accolades. The New York Magazine said it was the best 2-player game of 2020. I think it was definitely a good game. Sure. But also our shipment, which was supposed to arrive in October, arrived December 21st. And so we missed that. Just from that one article in New York Magazine, I had maybe 600 emails from people saying, I want to get your game. Where can I get it? And I had to say, well, it's on a ship. Sorry. And, they want it for Christmas. So they want it for the holidays. So that hurt. So now we're in a point where with Votes for Women, we're going to airmail them here. That's $20 a game. We're only going to do a small print run of 1,500. So we're going to lose money, or we're going to break even. Now, we still think that's worth it as a company because we think this game is amazing. It's about an untold part of history, at least in the gaming world. And I think we're at a point now where history isn't only about white males. We're interested in a broader history of the United States. And so I think that there is a good market for that. And separately, we're trying to source US printing production at the quality that we can get in China. And we don't mind if it's a little bit more money, as long as we can still make a reasonable profit, and we're saving all that money on the shipping and all the headaches. It's worth it to us. And plus we want to reward our Kickstarter backers. I mean, they're riding with us, and that this game's supposed to get here in the summer, and it's late August now, and it's not going to get here till October. And if there's some little bump,
it's cooperative. So, it is a historical time subject. It's a card game. It's going to get covered in the One Stop Co-op Shop. I can't wait.
Yes.
It's going to be great.
But if you're a normal publisher and you have more overhead than we do, right? You have a warehouse employees, you have on staff designers, whatever, larger companies have these. Well, if their charges, if the cost to produce their game basically just really doubled, and yet they're charging the same price, they're going to be out of money. They're going to lose. And, I think that a company that, Tasty Minstrel Games, who I backed a lot of their games. I bought games of theirs before they even used Kickstarter, and they started doing this deluxified game project because the margins, they needed those margins. And but doing that shrank their market, and now they're in some kind of modified version of bankruptcy. So,
and they still had projects that were not unfulfilled, right?
Well, so I had one project by them that was unfulfilled, and a refund hit my credit card.
Okay.
I don't know, a week or two ago. So they're doing the right thing. I'm not slagging them at all. I want to be really clear about that, but they had 7 people on staff, and that's a lot of mouths to feed. And the margin was there for them, and the problems were too great. And I think you're going to see, we're lucky that our overhead is relatively low, and so we can survive. And frankly, I had a previous job that I made a little bit of more money, so we can kind of make it through the lean times. My wife has a good paying job, so we're lucky. This isn't how we necessarily feed ourselves. But if that wasn't the case, then I'd be a lot more worried. I would have a lot more worry lines. I'd be more like, Deluxify, Deluxe. I mean, who knows what right? But because I'm in a I wouldn't say privileged position, but at least a semi-privileged position, we can ride this out for another year or two. But I think that we're going to hold the line on our game prices, at least for 2022. Our Kickstarters will still be $50, $10 shipping in the US for one game. And we're not going to change that, but it's going to squish our margins, and, that so be it. We'll maybe have to be a little tighter in some of our donations, but we're going to do our best to do that. Now, of course, if Target comes along and taps us on the shoulder and says, we'd like 50,000 games, and you're only going to make $8 a game, but 50 1,000 times 8, that's $400,000. Then we're going to, you can hold me to this. If Votes for Women, it gets an order from Target, I guarantee you we're going to spread $50,000 cash just around to people in the industry to help out the ecosystem to make it better. So, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Nobody else should either. So
yeah, that's lightning the bottle, that Target thing.
Yep. So,
and that's the whole nother pricing thing in terms of like what the economics of it. And, because Target really is a major player in keeping prices down.
Absolutely.
They want, Fireball Island was like $80 Kickstarter, and it's like, here, give me a $30 game. And, I'm not taking Terraforming Mars. Give me the little card game so that's a whole other discussion as well. So it's not like it's, I use the word gentrification. That's a scary word. Like everything's getting unaffordable. I'm just saying that there's that energy in the system, and, there's a lot of other things going on too.
Yeah. There's pressures both ways. There's always going to be pressures both ways. And all we can do is try to, navigate through that the best we can, ethically and yet sensibly from an economic standpoint.
And from the social, you said ethical. I would think of it as social, like caring about people's psychology.
Yep.
So we're speaking the same language, absolutely.
Yep.
So just in sum, so we are going to see. So the deluxification issue is separate, right? And so that the whole thing of rising prices is separate. Now we're talking about the manufacturing. That's $60/$70 game. What do you think is going to be, if you had to make like a prediction? Not your game necessarily, but like just the average $60 to $7 game. What are we looking at concretely?
You're going to either see corners cut on production, having less cards or having thinner cards or having less pieces or wherever or whatever you can do to cut costs, which usually means compromising quality, or you're going to see the $70 game is going to be an $80 game or an $85 game. And that's just really
$10 to $15 ish. Like, I mean,
that would be my guess. And
I guess,
and and part of it is based on the quantity that people are printing. If they're making 50,000 copies, if it's a big Asmodee game, they can, because they have such a scale, they can absorb it a little bit more, and they might only go up $5 or $7 or however they handle their pricing. But you're definitely going to see a bump up for most folks. As I alluded to before, we're going to hold the price for 2022, but if it keeps going up and, inflation goes up, I can't make any promise about what we'll do in 2023. So I think that's my best prediction.
I think again, predictions, but we hear that prices are going to go up. And I think there's that catastrophe instinct of like, okay, well, oh my God, $100 for a Ticket to Ride.
I don't think we're ever going to get that. Well, maybe in 2050. So
okay, so we're not looking at $100 for a Ticket to Ride quite yet. That's a little bit for or Pandemic. Yeah. Pandemic is that's my favorite game. Yoink, Pandemic.
Nice. So what is that what is that? $50 retail now?
Somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I bet you'll see later next year it'll be $60 or $55. Like it's going to be inevitable unless the publisher has such a hit that they can absorb it because of the quantity they're producing, and they can absorb that increased cost. Or they might, like I say, because there's money to be made, and they can kind of not get away with it, but like it's not going to be a cause this outcry to raise things the same as other games are being raised, and so who knows? But that's what we're talking about in terms of a range, right? But I think you're going to see, inflation is going to creep up and cause lots of things to increase in price. So I don't think that you're going to see food prices increase by a little bit. You're going to see car prices increase by a little bit. Like you're going to see this kind of creeping inflation anyways in other parts. So it really won't be that much of a surprise in a way, I don't think so. Although it'll probably be larger because we're more of a niche industry and a little bit of I wouldn't say we're a luxury good, but we're a semi-luxury good, right? I mean, it tends to be an industry that attracts a slightly wealthier group of folks that slightly more educated. That's the nature of the beast. So.
I think, thank you so much. That was like such a great education, clarification for me, something, and again, whenever I put a video up on Voices, I think there's an instinct to say, okay, I'm canceling and shaming. It's like, no, I really want to just have the discussions, but open up lanes for positive ways forward, illumination. And I had no idea. I've never even heard of Fort Circle before this whole thing. And now I have, this amazing historical game makers connection with Jason Matthews, who's one of the great historical designers. So we're going to get stuff from him too. So this was awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate the time.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
If you can change your mind, you can change the world, people. So until next time, hey, everybody.